Hi, it's KCCK's Culture Crawl. I'm Dennis Green, and my guest today is Damani Phillips, performing at the next Jazz Under the Stars.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Very excited.
Jazz Under the Stars 3, which is coming up. And this is now this band has been practicing and performing for a while, but it's not in terms of Damani Phillips projects. It's one of your newer ones.
Absolutely.
Rhodes Scholars. The music of Spyro Gyra.
Yes, sir.
So before we get anywhere else, we got to get rid of the elephant in the room.
Okay.
Damani Phillips, you are known as a hard-charging, hard-bopping jazz guy, and there are, and when you told me that you were putting together a Spyro Gyra tribute band, it was like, my first thought was, oh, cool. My second thought was, Damani, wow, okay, I need to know more about this.
Yeah. It's funny. I'm of the belief that good music is good music. And to be honest with you, coincidentally, I think philosophically speaking, it's important that we acknowledge and exude the fact that the more things you're able to do well, the better off you're going to be in terms of being able to, make a living as a musician. And so home is home, and it'll always be home. And, I have that place or that era of jazz history that I come from most. That is definitely speaks to my heart, but there are many other elements of this music too. That's kind of the beauty of it. It's multifaceted, and you want to at least be able to dip your toe into those waters and be able to function. And it just so happens that Spyro Gyra is one of the bands that I ran into very first along the way, even before I was even interested in jazz.
Yeah. So tell me about that. So a young Damani Phillips is probably just starting on the saxophone, and you hear an instrumental song on the radio.
Well, I'm going to tell you, this is a funny story. At that time, I was pretty young. I would say maybe 7th, 8th grade. And I was all classical. I was diehard classical saxophone to the bone. And funny enough, I don't remember the Columbia Record Club where you used to tape a penny to the to the paper insert and then mail it in, and they'd send you like 10 CDs. That was still a thing there. I think I might have dated myself by telling you that story, but I'm okay with it. And so somebody shared the album Morning Dance, I think it's called. And I was completely taken by that. And so I got that Columbia House insert, put my penny taped my penny to the insert and sent it in and ordered all Spyro Gyra CDs. And so that was the beginning of my love affair with them. And at that point I had 11 albums, and I put them all on heavy rotation. And from that point forward, I was officially hooked.
Morning Dance, of course, was a big pop hit in the early 80s, but as you and I talked about off air a little bit, and as you discovered even as a youngster, that even though the music of Spyro Gyra was accessible to a wide range of different levels of appreciation of jazz, those guys are top-notch musicians, and there's a lot of depth and texture, and there's a lot going on in all of those.
I mean, that was the thing that drew me to them. I didn't, like I say, at that point in time, I didn't know anything about jazz in a literal sense. I just knew that there was something, incredibly hip and cohesive about that band as a unit that was kind of infectious. And so, and by the way, don't be fooled. Don't let the smooth taste fool you in terms of that music. When you get down to brass tacks and you start wrestling with it, it is absolutely difficult. I mean, it's the real deal. And that's kind of the mark in my mind of a really good band, where they're playing really complex, difficult stuff, and it feels effortless. Feels breezy, like, you know what I mean? Like the smooth jazz label we tend to want to apply to it. But when you actually see that on paper and you're wrestling with it with a band, you realize just how in-depth that stuff is. Those guys are the real deal when it comes to quality musicianship. And I mean that with every ounce of my being. And now that we've had to wrestle with putting that music together, we've learned the hard way just how together those guys were to make that band sound that clean and that effortless every time they played.
So fast forward now many years, and you decide that this is a project that you want to tackle, and you've recruited a pretty fair collection of musicians to work with you on this.
Yeah, I did okay on that front. You know, this was actually a collaborative effort between Dan Moore and I. Dan Moore is a percussion professor at Iowa.
Yep.
Been
at KCCK many times.
Okay, that's right. I know he's pretty active around here too. He and I both have a similar love affair with Spyro Gyra music, and in conversation we ended up finding out or discovering that we both loved that stuff and had history with it, and so we decided to put together a band that dealt with it exclusively. So he's my partner in crime, so to speak, in terms of fronting this band. And put together a pretty stellar lineup of musicians around us, people that most folks in this area will know. We have Tim Crumley handling the drum chair, who's played with many, many, many groups. We have my colleague at Iowa, William Minifield, who's playing the keyboard chair and absolutely destroying it. And all the way over from Des Moines, we have Steve Charlton, who doesn't make it over on this side of the state, I think, as much as he should.
Nearly enough,
right.
But it's always a happy thing when Steve shows up with his bass.
Well, you know, we're trying to make a way for these, you know, to address this shortcoming and get them over here on this side of the state a little more often.
So heading into this music, and of course, you just said that it is way harder than people might imagine. Just listening to it through the years. Was there a particular tune or era of the band or area that you really had to seriously you had to turn to everybody and say, okay, guys, we really got to work this?
Yeah. The further the band got into their history, the more involved it became. I think that's kind of a natural extension of that chemistry that builds and that cohesion. In the beginning, you know what I mean, you're thinking more along the lines of radio airplay and, you know what I mean, and relatability to a general public. But as they got into their catalog, I'd say once we hit right around the 90s is when you start getting these really involved tunes that are, you know what I mean, that sound, are easy on the ear, but are absolutely dastardly on the musical side of it in terms of what goes into making those tunes happen. But I'm a fan of all eras of their music equally. I didn't approach it from that standpoint of I'm going to learn the beginning stuff. I just got a whole smorgasbord of things, and that was my introduction to them, was from all over the course of that band's history.
So the repertoire of Rhodes Scholars will be, across the entire, 40-year history of this band?
Yep. We aren't doing quite as much with the more recent stuff because the band has, kind of become a different iteration than it has been in the past. Not that that's bad stuff or anything, but we also recognize too that if we want the band to gain some traction, you need to play some of the tunes that people recognize. So we made a pretty deliberate effort to put a fairly healthy chunk of those tunes that were, well known and loved, and sprinkled in some of those that weren't quite as popular in the radio airplay sense, but are equally rewarding or fulfilling on the musical side of it.
Our student band for this show on Jazz Under the Stars is also one that you have a connection to.
Yep.
Because it's from Harlan in Southwest Iowa. That's my old stomping grounds,
oh,
by
I
the
didn't
way.
know you went to school there.
I did not in Harlan, but they were in our conference.
Got you.
So I'm real familiar with that school and that neck of the woods. And they have had a great season. They were the top 3A band at the Jazz Championships.
Yeah.
And then they came to your first ever University of Iowa Combo Festival and just destroyed things. And their prize for involvement in that was a gig at Jazz Under the Stars.
Absolutely. And appreciate the graciousness of KCCK for making that happen. That's the kind of, experience and the kind of prize that, there's no substitute for.
Well, it's totally our pleasure, and I've had a chance to chat with Bill Carney, who's the director there, and met again a few of the students in that band at All State Jazz back in May, and they're pretty excited about coming.
Yeah, I mean, he's doing some pretty good work up there. Yeah. You know what I mean? Way out in Harlan, who'd have thunk it? But it's kind of the whole point of all of this, right? Is to, find out what's really going on across the state. So I'm really pleased that, it was possible to not only have them come and play in front of, that number of people, but to do so on the same night that we're playing.
Yes, that worked out really well.
Yeah.
Also, at this Jazz Under the Stars, it's our annual album and CD sale. So there will be, just to the side of the stage, there'll be a couple of thousand albums and CDs spread out for people to pick through and take advantage of, because we still believe in physical media around here.
I'm old school too, man. I still have my whole CD collection downstairs and have a CD player in every room. Now, for my students, they're not so enthusiastic about seeing that, but you know what? It's okay. Old habits die hard.
Hey, you don't own music unless you own it.
Touche. Something about having that physical product in your hand, man. There's simply no substitute for it.
Prices start at just $1 a disc, but we have had a rather large number of donations of some pretty vintage vinyl, so we're going to have kind of a collectible box set aside with some
Ante
stuff.
Has been up.
Ante is You're not going to get everything for $1, but,
I get you.
But it's going to be great. So as you during your show, and you don't want to spoil things too much, what do you kind of consider the highlights? Is there a particular tune that when the band locks in, you just kind of go, oh man, this is it?
It's funny. I know this is going to sound cliche, but it has turned out to be the case every time we perform. Morning Dance ends up being the best tune on the set. We always close the show with it, and we inserted this like a marimba cadenza at the beginning where Dan just does his thing for a couple of minutes, and it has turned out to be absolutely flawless every single time. So I think that, apart from it being a very appropriate close for the show, musically speaking, it really is one of the highlights of the entire set.
Well, sometimes the first one is the best one.
Hey, you know what I mean? The one you have the longest history with.
That's right. Well, ever since you told me about actually Tim Crumley slipped me a text.
Oh, I'm sure he did.
early on saying, don't say anything, but I am working on this way cool project with Damani. Ever since then, I have been anxious to get this band to Jazz Under the Stars, and so excited we're going to be able to do it. Yeah,
Tim is so gung-ho about it too, man. It's almost infectious. You know what I mean? Just in case you get a little bit lazy, Tim will remind you ever so gently that we got work to do.
Thursday in Neoridge Park, it's Jazz Under the Stars 3, the KCCK album and CD sale, and of course, opening for Rhodes Scholars will be the Harlan Jazz Combo. Damani, if people are very familiar with your work and get to see you in many different venues around here, but if for some reason they haven't had a chance to follow you online, how do they locate you and your music?
Yep, really easy. Just go to my website, DamaniPhillips.com. And you can get access to everything from there: social media, connections, all of my music, story about what I've been doing and where I'm from, and of course, itinerary of events that are coming up.
And of course, you can listen to KCCK because we play it all the time.
That too, which I do appreciate you guys showing love and support.
We totally do. Damani, it's always a pleasure to see you, and really looking forward to your show at Neoridge Park.
Likewise. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks. You can hear the Culture Crawl live on the radio many weekdays at 10:30, or download the podcast, watch or listen on your own schedule at kcck.org/culture, or using your favorite podcast player. I'm Dennis Green, and I'll talk to you later.